When you think about legendary heroes, some are just stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Others get remembered, maybe even worshipped in some way.
Sure.
But the really great ones, they kind of become the soul of a nation's identity.
That's a great way to put it. They embody something essential.
Exactly. And today, we're doing a deep dive into one of those, Rostam, often called, well, the greatest epic hero in Persian mythology.
Absolutely central.
And our whole exploration here, it's drawn straight from the source material you've provided us.
Yeah.
These really fascinating excerpts from Rostam, Persia's eternal sword and guardian hero.
A text that really tries to distill his essence from the primary source.
So our mission, really, is to unpack who Rostam was. What does that title, The Sword of Persia, really mean?
Mm-hmm.
And what does he represent culturally? We want to pull out the most compelling stuff from the source, just for you, listening in. It's going to be, well, an epic journey.
It really is. And Rostam is the cornerstone of Iran's national epic, Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. And he's so much more than just like a strong guy. The source really emphasizes this. He embodies these ideals, strength, yes, but also loyalty, and this particular kind of moral integrity that's resonated for, well, over 1,000 years.
Okay, let's dig into that title then, The Sword of Persia. That sounds intense. Does the source break down what it signifies? Is it purely about, being good in a fight?
Well, the material suggests it's both. It's literal. He was the ultimate protector on the battlefield, no doubt.
Okay.
But it's also deeply symbolic. The title sword really points to his role as the guardian, the upholder of the realm's divine order. It's about the purpose behind his power.
Purpose. How so?
It was for protection, for justice, not for, say, conquering others. That's a key distinction the source makes.
Gotcha. And his origin story. That's pretty unique too, isn't it? Born to Zal?
Yeah, Zal, the white-haired warrior, famously raised by the Simurgh, the mythical bird.
Right. And Rudabeh, a princess. The birth itself sounds almost miraculous, but also really dangerous.
Extremely dangerous for Rudabeh, yes.
Mm.
The source describes it as near fatal.
Wow.
But what's incredible is the Simurgh's role. This mythical creature instructs Zal, essentially teaching him how to perform what scholars now recognize as arguably the first recorded instance of a Caesarean section in literature.
No way. In an ancient epic. That's amazing.
It's an astonishing detail.
So this unique birth, divinely assisted, you could say, does the source link that directly to his destiny? Does it set him apart from the start?
Absolutely. If you look at the bigger picture presented in the Shahnameh, which the source reflects on, his lineage is powerful. You've got Zal's connection to spiritual wisdom via the Simurgh and Rudabeh's royal bloodline. So this birth, guided by a cosmic being like the Simurgh, isn't just dramatic flair. It really underscores his destiny as the chosen, the divinely favored guardian of Iran, or Iran Shar, as the ancient realm is called in the epic.
Iran Shar. Okay, so guardian. That brings us to maybe his most famous test, right? The 7 labors, the Haft of Rostam.
Exactly, the Haft.
He undertakes this incredibly dangerous journey to rescue the king, Kavus, who's been captured and blinded.
That's the setup, a classic hero's quest structure.
Now, here's where I think it gets really interesting based on the source. It stresses these weren't just like physical fights, punching monsters.
Yeah.
What else were these trials testing? What do they show us about him besides brute strength?
This is absolutely key, and the source material highlights it well. The Haft tested him on, well, multiple levels.
Well,
yes, enormous bravery was needed fighting dragons, demons, the usual epic stuff.
sure.
But the source points to wisdom, too. He had to navigate situations that were traps, basically. They required cleverness, strategy, not just overwhelming force.
Oh, so brains as well as brawn.
Definitely. And maybe most importantly, spiritual strength. Resisting temptation, staying focused on the mission, staying loyal, even when the king he was saving, Kavus, was often portrayed as flawed, even foolish.
Right, so it wasn't blind loyalty to a person, but to a higher principle.
Precisely. The source suggests the labors prove he embodies these core Persian moral ideals. Justice, loyalty, but also restraint, courage. He's living these virtues through his actions, his choices. It's not just about having superpowers,
Makes sense. And like any great warrior, he had his iconic gear. The source mentions that massive mace.
The ox-head mace, yeah, a symbol of his might.
And his horse, Raksh, also legendary.
Oh, Raksh is crucial. The source doesn't just describe him as a horse. He's portrayed as being as fierce, as intelligent, and as incredibly faithful as Rostam himself.
So a true companion.
Absolutely. Through thick and thin, Raksh is there. Another layer to Rostam's character, his bond with this creature.
And what drove him through all this? Serving these kings, undertaking these labors, the source seems clear it wasn't personal ambition, was it? Not about gaining power for himself.
Exactly. His loyalty, fundamentally, was to Iran-Shah, to the idea of Iran, to the divine order, to his duty. He served different kings, yes, some better than others, but his ultimate commitment, according to the source, was always to maintaining order against chaos, upholding honor, even if it cost him personally. He was the realm's defender, its conscience in many ways.
But it wasn't all glory and triumph. The epic, and the source material reflects this, includes probably one of the most heartbreaking stories ever told, the death of Sohrab.
Ah, yes. Profoundly tragic. Rostam unknowingly kills his own son, Sohrab, in single combat.
It's devastating just to think about. So what does the source material say about the meaning of this tragedy? Compared to Greek tragedy, sure, but what's its significance within this Persian epic?
The source frames it as this masterpiece of fate, mistaken identity, and just overwhelming sorrow. Rostam's grief when he realizes what he's done, it's immense.
I can only imagine.
Symbolically, it's powerful. It really underscores the brutal human cost of conflict, the terrible consequences of miscommunication, of identities hidden or mistaken, and crucially, it shows the vulnerability of even the greatest hero.
Yeah, even the sword of Persia isn't immune.
Exactly. It reveals the limits of strength when faced with destiny, with tragic error. It adds this incredible depth and humanity to him. It's not just about winning battles, it's about enduring loss.
Even Rostam's own death. It involves betrayal, doesn't it? But also a final act of defiance.
That's right. Betrayed by his own half-brother, Shagad, he's tripped into falling into a pit filled with hidden spears.
Awful.
But even then, as he's dying, the source highlights his last act. He asks for his bow, and with his remaining strength, he shoots and kills Shagad, who is hiding behind a tree.
Wow. So vigilant to the very end.
Yes. He dies not just as a victim, but as a sentinel still guarding, still acting against betrayal. The source paints it vividly, fulfilling his role, hand on his sword metaphorically, Iran on his lips.
So looking back at everything, he's clearly much more than just a character in an old book. What does the source say about his lasting cultural significance? What does Rostam represent in Persian culture?
He becomes this fundamental cultural archetype. The source lists several things. He embodies Khorasanian valor, Khorasan being a region historically known for its warriors, a kind of regional ideal of courage.
Okay.
He represents Zoroastrian ethics, the moral principles of the ancient Persian religion finding expression in his actions. And significantly, he's linked to this ancient Persian concept of far.
Far. What's that exactly?
It's often translated as divine glory or kingly charisma. It's this aura of legitimacy, of divine favor and protection, usually associated with righteous kings in the Shahnameh. Rostam, though not a king himself, clearly emphasizes this protective righteous power this far.
Interesting. And his image, his stories, they didn't just fade away. You see him everywhere in Persian art.
Oh, constantly. For centuries, in intricate manuscript illustrations, on pilework and paintings, in the ongoing tradition of storytelling, he's deeply woven into the visual and oral culture.
So let's circle back then one last time to that title, The Sword of Persia. Knowing his whole story now, the miraculous birth, the trials testing his character, the tragedy, the vigilant death, what's the deepest layer of meaning there, according to the source?
I think the source really clarifies it beautifully by the end. He wasn't called the sword because he loved war or sought conflict.
Right, you mentioned that.
He was the sword because he was the final line of defense. The one who stood between the ordered world, Iran-Shah, and the forces of chaos and darkness. His strength, his sword, was wielded for justice, for dignity, for the very soul of the nation, not for domination.
Like a tool used only when necessary.
Exactly, like a sword itself forged in the fire of his origins, shaped and tempered by his trials, and only drawn when words failed, when defense was absolutely necessary. The source material uses this really evocative line. He was more than muscle, more than myth. Rostam was Persia's conscience wrapped in iron.
Wow, that's powerful.
It sums it up well. He's remembered as the eternal guardian, the protector, not the conqueror. He's not worshipped like a god, but deeply remembered and respected for what he stood for.
And that resonance, it continues. The source mentioned people still invoke his name today.
Yes, it notes that sometimes when speaking about embodying qualities like honor, strength, and purpose all at once, people might say, I am Rostam, or he is a Rostam.
Right.
It signifies that ideal.
So quite a journey we've taken. From that incredible birth hinting at destiny, through trials that were as much about morality as might, facing that profound human tragedy with Sohrab, and ending as that ever-vigilant protector. The mightiest warrior, yes, but the source really paints him as fundamentally a guardian, embodying these core ideals of a civilization.
Absolutely. And maybe, the most enduring takeaway from Rostam's story, as the source presents it, is this idea that the heroes who last, the ones who truly resonate, aren't always defined by sheer conquest, but perhaps more by what they choose to protect, the sacrifices they make, and the moral code they stick to, even when it's incredibly difficult, even when it brings personal suffering.
That definitely gives you something to think about. What qualities do define a true guardian, a true hero? In any culture, really.
It's a question that echoes, isn't it?
It really does. Well, thank you for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of Rostam.